I'll let him come in anyway.
Erev Tov, everyone. The parsha begins, Vayikro el Moshe, Vayedaber Elov. All the Meforshim point out that's a redundancy in language. The Torah wanted to tell us that Kaviyachol, heaven is speaking to Moshe. The parsha should begin by Daber Hashem al Moshe Lemor, the way it begins in the majority of cases throughout the Torah. So why does it say Vayikro el Moshe? And then it says Vayedaber, that he's going to speak to Moshe. And what does it mean, Vayikra, he called to Moshe? So there's an idea here that's expressed. Many of the Meforshim say it in different ways, but it's the basic idea. When Moshe Rabbeinu came to Paro, so he said, Elokeo Ivrim Nikro Eleinu. The God of the Hebrews called out to us. When Paro understood it, it says in the Torah in another pasuk, Nikro Eleinu with a hey, was a happenstance. It occurred. But Moshe wanted it to be with an aleph. Chazal between Moshe and Bilam is Vayikor. That Bilam didn't understand Vayikra. So it was only a one-time shot. It happened, So the Meforshim say that the idea here of Vayikra is that it is a permanent relationship. So that even when there is no Vayedaber Elov, even when there is no instruction, so to speak, Moshe always feels that Hashem is talking to him. He hears a message from heaven. Whereas if you say only Vayikar, so it's only that one instance, what happened then, more than that doesn't exist. So therefore, that when it came to the building of the Mishkan, so it says, Re'u Korah Hashem, B'Shem B'Tzalel ben Uri ben Hur. What does that mean, Korah Hashem? He called his name. So when we discussed that a few weeks ago, I mentioned to you the pshat is that Korah Hashem refers to the talents that a person has. The Rabbanu Shalom gave B'Tzalel ben Uri ben Hur these talents. And therefore, when the opportunity would arise, that he would be able to use those talents and skills to build the Mishkan, so he was the natural man to fulfill the role. But here we want to say perhaps a deeper thought. B'Tzalel, the Gemara says, Rashi quotes it, that his name is B'Tselel El. He is in the shadow of God, meaning Hashem tzilcha al yad yaminecha. Whatever we do is in the shadow of God. And because of that, that is his relationship. Just as if you stand in the sun and you move your hand, so your shadow moves its hand also. So that's the relationship of your hand to your body, which is expressed in the movement of the shadow as well. So the relationship of the person to heaven is in the same way. That's why he's B'Tselel El. And that's why it says, Ru Korah Hashem. God called out to him. He didn't call out once. It's a relationship. God always speaks to B'Tselel. B'Tselel always speaks to Hashem. They're bound together, so to speak. Just as the shadow of the person is always bound to the person himself or herself. So the idea of Korah, of calling out, that idea expresses the fact that whatever we do is relative to our relation. So it says, Vayikro el Moshe. So Moshe started his mission, so to speak. So Moshe didn't want it, right? We read, Shlach no biyad tishlach, send Aaron, send somebody else. And he else Vasoyim, I can't speak. The Jewish people are not worthy. 100 excuses. So the excuses are basically that Moshe does not want to have the relationship. He doesn't want to be bound to it. It's a great question that all the Meforshim discussed. Well, what about Moshe before the story that we read in Chumash Shmos? Where was Moshe for those 60 years? From when he ran away from Paro? What happened to him then? So some say he was sitting in Kollel. He was learning. There's no Torah then. Nevertheless, godliness does not need a curriculum. Some say that he was training to become a melech. That he was a king of tribes in Africa somewhere that taught him skills in leadership, in patience, in having a vision for the cloud, so that when he would return, he would have, so to speak, the right mindset to become the leader of the Jewish people. And some say that Moshe was, became Mr. Moses. He didn't do anything. He went to Florida in the winter, he had a good time. He's happy by Absileni Mecher of Paro. He's a survivor. So we know from our own experience, from the generation of survivors, is that there were those that wanted to forget everything, dump the past, start a new life all over, have nothing to do with what went before. I knew many people like that. They didn't even want to be reminded that they were Jewish. And there were others that were driven to rebuild the Jewish people. That I was saved for a reason, and in some way I was saved for a higher purpose. And therefore I'm going to exploit the chance. I'm going to build on it. So we don't know what Moshe was before. It's all different. But apparently Moshe always had a relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam, one way or another. And therefore, Vayikra El Moshe is not only a description of the mitzvahs of the korbanos which appear in this week's parsha, but Vayikra El Moshe is a description of the general relationship of Moshe to Ribono Shel Olam. Moshe always felt that there's a calling, somebody's calling him. I know, Rebbe. So when the Bochrim wanted to, so to speak, joke around in the shiur, they didn't want to concentrate anymore. So he would say, Yiddish, he would say, I have an important telephone call, please be quiet. So we waited for him to go out of the room to get the telephone call because nobody had a pocket telephone. So he thought he was going to the office. He didn't go anywhere. So he said, Rebbe, what happened to the telephone call? He said, didn't you hear? They called me. They called me that we have to finish learning. The other half of the Teshuvos isn't done. So that's a call. That's a relationship. That's how you think of things. So this was Moshe Rabbeinu's greatness, is that it was constantly Vayikra El Moshe. And that explains the idea that I discussed before, that we all discussed here, of the small aleph, of the anova of Moshe. So why is Moshe, so if Moshe wanted anova, so when it says Vayidaber Hashem Moshe, he could have written with a half a resh or a small daled. But Moshe's anova was, he knew that he had this permanent relationship, this overreaching connection that was always with him. Therefore, and that's true by Klal Yisrael. The Ribono Shel Olam shows us, always calls out to us in many different ways. The Mishnah says in Ovos, V'chol yom v'yom, Paschal Yotzes Ma'ar Chorev. Every day they call out to us. A voice comes out from Sinai to speak about Torah, to speak about goodness, to speak about the Yam HaNivchor, to speak about our being special. So it depends if your antenna are tuned to that frequency. You hear that Basco. You hear that they're calling on to you. People always say, I tried to call you, but the line was busy. So that's a metaphor, right? Heaven tried to call us, but the line was busy because we're busy with other things. We're not open to receive the call from heaven. So I remember that when I became a lawyer, way back, so one of the great inventions was there's a telephone that you could have two lines on the same telephone. Two buttons, two lines. So if one was busy, the other could ring. So I mentioned that to one of my rabbeim. So he said, every Jew has to have two lines. You have to know that the Rebbeinu Shalom can reach you and that you can reach him. And so therefore, if one line is busy with all of the mundane things that we do in life that are necessary, we have the other line that's still open, that we can still have Vayikro el Moshe, Ru Korah Hashem b'Shem B'Tzalel, Elokeo Ivrim Nikro Aleinu. And that really sums up the relationship that the Rebbeinu Shalom wished for us, and that Moshe Torah Tziva Lona Moshe Morosho Kilas Yaakov. That's the Morosho, the Yerusha that we have. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer, Otza Kodesh Baruch Hu L'Zakos Yisrael, L'Fichol Chibur Lahem Torah Mitzvot Shenemer, Adonai Chafetz Aman Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir.